A hardened biker just wanted to finish his coffee, but a desperate child's plea in a rainy diner forced him to break every rule he lived by. The rain was coming down in sheets, hammering the tin roof of the diner with a rhythm that matched the throbbing in my temples. It was one of those Tuesdays, the kind where the coffee tastes like burnt disappointment and the whole world seems gray and washed out. I was hunched over a cracked ceramic mug in a corner booth, the worn vinyl sticking to the back of my leather cut. The club patch on my back, the skull with its grinning teeth, felt heavier than usual. I just wanted to finish my coffee, pay the tab, and ride until the noise in my head was nothing but wind. Minding my own business. That's the rule. See nothing, hear nothing, do nothing, unless it's club business. That's when the bell over the diner door chimed, a cheerful, out-of-place sound in the gloom. A woman stumbled in, pulling two small children behind her. She was a wreck. Her hair was soaked and plastered to her forehead, her eyes wide and frantic, darting around the room like she was looking for an escape route that didn't exist. The kids were a matched set of misery. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6, with big, tear-filled brown eyes, was clutching a worn-out stuffed elephant like it was a life raft. Her brother, a few years older, maybe 9, had a look on his face I recognized. It was the look of a kid who'd been forced to become an adult way too soon. His jaw was set, and his free hand was balled into a tiny, determined fist. He stood between his mom and the door, a pint-sized guardian. I took a slow sip of my coffee, turning my head slightly to look out the window, trying to signal I wasn't interested. Just another domestic drama. A fight with the husband, a bad day, whatever. It wasn't my circus, and they weren't my monkeys. The waitress, a tired-looking woman named Brenda, started toward them with a couple of menus, but the mother just shook her head, pulling the kids toward a booth on the opposite side of the diner from me. She was whispering to them, urgent, soothing sounds that didn't seem to be working. The little girl started to cry, a quiet, hiccuping sound that grated on my nerves. I was about to flag Brenda down for the check when the bell chimed again. This time, it wasn't a family running from the rain. 2 people stepped in, a man and a woman, and they immediately changed the entire atmosphere of the place. They were dressed in sharp, sterile-looking business attire that didn't belong in a roadside greasy spoon. The woman had her hair pulled back in a severe bun and held a clipboard like a weapon. The man had a polished, condescending smile that didn't reach his eyes. They weren't cops, but they radiated an authority that was just as unsettling. Their eyes scanned the diner for a fraction of a second before locking onto the mother and her 2 kids. The air went cold. The mother saw them and shrank back into the booth, pulling her children closer. The little boy stood up on the vinyl seat, putting himself in front of his sister. "Ma'am," the suit woman said, her voice low but carrying across the quiet diner. It was smooth, professional, and completely devoid of any warmth. "We can do this quietly. You know we have the order." The mother started shaking her head, tears now streaming down her face. "No, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You don't understand. He's not safe with him. Please, just give me more time." The man stepped forward. "The court has made its decision. We are here to enforce it. Let's not make this more difficult for the children than it already is." He was talking to the mother, but his eyes were on the little girl, and a chill went down my spine. This was it, the point of no return. I should have just dropped a 20 on the table and walked out. Every instinct honed by years of staying alive and out of trouble was screaming at me to leave. This was a family court mess, a custody battle, the kind of swamp that swallows you whole. Getting involved was a rookie mistake. But then I looked at the boy. He wasn't crying. His face was a mask of pure, defiant rage. He watched the 2 suits approach his table like they were wolves circling a campfire. He saw his mother's crumbling resolve. He saw his little sister burying her face in their mom's jacket, her small body trembling. And then his eyes swept the room, searching, desperate. They passed over the other patrons, who were all pretending to be fascinated by their eggs. They passed over Brenda, who was frozen behind the counter. And then they landed on me. He took me in for a full 3 seconds. My size, the shaved head, the graying beard, the ink crawling up my neck, and the skull on my cut. I saw the calculation in his eyes. He wasn't seeing a monster. He was seeing the biggest, scariest thing in the room that wasn't trying to hurt his family. In his world of collapsing certainties, I was a rock. A dangerous, unpredictable rock. But a rock nonetheless. The woman in the suit reached for the little girl. "Come on, sweetheart, it's time to go." "No," the mother sobbed, trying to shield her. That's when the boy moved. He scrambled out of the booth so fast he was a blur. He didn't run for the door. He didn't run to his mom. He ran straight to me. He skidded to a stop at my table, his chest heaving. He had to crane his neck to look up at me, but his gaze was unwavering. It was the most adult look I'd ever seen on a child's face. The diner fell completely silent, the only sounds being the rain, the little girl's muffled sobs, and the boy's ragged breathing. He planted his small sneakers on the greasy linoleum floor, looked me dead in the eye, and his voice, though small, cut through the tension like a razor. "Please, mister," he said, his voice trembling but clear. "You're bigger than them. Please, don't let them take my sister." For a long second, the world seemed to freeze. Every person in that diner, every drop of rain sliding down the window pane, every particle of greasy air hung suspended in the space created by that one impossible question. My brain, the part that had kept me out of prison for the last decade, was screaming every profanity known to man. "Get up. Walk out. Not your problem." But my body didn't move. My eyes were locked on the kid. He hadn't blinked. He was waiting for an answer, and in his eyes there was no doubt what that answer should be. He'd picked his champion, and God help me, it was me. I slowly lowered my coffee mug, the ceramic clinking softly against the saucer. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. I let my gaze drift from the boy's face to the two suits. They had stopped, their professional smiles replaced with matching expressions of annoyance. The woman, clipboard lady, took a step forward. "Son," she said, her voice dripping with condescending patience, "this is a grown-up situation. Go back to your mother." The boy didn't even look at her. His eyes were still on me, his entire being focused on my response. He had bet everything on a single roll of the dice, and the dice were in my hand. I could feel the gazes of the other patrons like physical weight. They were scared, but they were watching, waiting to see what the big, bad biker would do. I let out a slow breath, the air rasping in my throat. I looked back at the boy. "What's your name, kid?" My voice was gravelly, rusty from disuse. "Leo," he said, not a hint of a stammer. "And your sister?" "Maya." I nodded, then finally lifted my head and looked directly at the suits. "You heard him," I said. It wasn't a question or a command, just a statement of fact. The male suit puffed out his chest. He was one of those guys who probably spent his weekends at a country club, convinced his expensive suit was a suit of armor. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to stay out of this. This is an official matter. We are from Child Protective Services, and we have a court order to take custody of Maya." He patted a briefcase slung over his shoulder. "Then show me," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. He scoffed. "I don't have to show you anything. You're not a party to this." "The kid just made me a party," I rumbled, leaning forward slightly. The movement was small, but it made the table creak. "He asked for my help, so now I'm asking you. Show me the order. Show me the part where it says you can drag a terrified little girl out of a diner against her mother's will." The woman stepped in front of her partner. "Sir, your interference is bordering on obstruction. If you don't return to your coffee, we will call the police." "Call 'em," I said, a grim smile touching my lips. "I've got time. While we wait, you can pull out that paperwork, unless there's a reason you don't want me to see it." That hit a nerve, a flicker of something. Uncertainty? Panic? Crossed the man's face before he masked it with indignation. He looked at the mother, who was watching this exchange with a sliver of hope dawning in her terrified eyes. "Ma'am, you need to control the situation. This man's involvement is only going to make things worse for you." But the mother found her voice. It was shaky, but it was there. He's right. You can't just take her." The judge said, "He said it was temporary. He doesn't know what her father is like." The man from CPS took a menacing step toward their booth. The court is well aware of the father's circumstances. Now, Maya." He never finished the sentence. I stood up. It was a slow, deliberate movement. I'm 6'4" and weigh 250 pounds, most of it muscle-hardened by years on the road, and a few less pleasant places. The worn leather of my cut groaned in protest. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. I wasn't standing aggressively, but I was filling the space between the suits and that family's booth, an unmovable object. I folded my arms across my chest. The skull on my patch felt like it was grinning right at them. "I don't think you were listening," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "You're not taking that little girl anywhere until I see a piece of paper with a judge's signature on it. And even then, we're all going to sit here and wait for the cops you were so eager to call." The man's face turned a blotchy red. His bravado was gone, replaced by pure fury. He saw his authority, the thing his entire world was built on, being challenged by a man he considered nothing more than trash. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers shaking with rage. "You've done it now," he spat, dialing the numbers. "You're going to regret this. Obstruction, threatening a state official. You're going to jail for a long, long time." I didn't flinch. I just held his gaze. Behind me I could hear Leo let out a shuddering breath and felt a tiny hand grab the back of my leather cut, holding on tight. The suit started speaking into the phone, his voice loud and self-important, reporting an incident, a hostile individual. Good. Let them come. The whole thing felt dirty, and the more I saw, the more I was sure this wasn't about a child's welfare. The call ended. A tense silence descended on the diner again, thick and suffocating. The two suits stood their ground, smugly waiting for their backup. The mother was praying under her breath. Little Maya was still hiding, and Leo's small hand was still gripping my cut, an anchor in the storm I had just pulled down on all of us. Less than 5 minutes later, the first siren wailed in the distance, a lonely cry that grew steadily closer. It was joined by another, then another. Red and blue lights began to strobe through the rain-streaked windows, painting the inside of the diner in frantic, flashing colors. The suits looked triumphant. This was the end game. They had won. The cops were here. But as two squad cars and a black state trooper SUV screeched to a halt outside, blocking the entire parking lot, a cold realization dawned on me. This wasn't a standard response for a simple custody dispute. This was a 5-alarm fire level of backup. This was way too much, way too fast. And as the car doors flew open and officers began to pile out, their hands already on their sidearms, I saw the man in the suit grin. It was a predatory, vicious thing. He hadn't just called the local cops. He had called in the cavalry, and they weren't here to read any paperwork. The diner door burst open with a crash that made everyone jump. 4 cops swarmed in, followed by a state trooper who looked like he'd been carved out of granite. They didn't saunter in. They moved with tactical precision, fanning out, hands hovering over their holsters. The lead officer, a short, stocky guy with a bristling mustache and a chip on his shoulder, locked eyes with the male suit from CPS. "We got a call about a disturbance," the cop said, his voice all business. "A man interfering with state officials." His gaze slid over to me, taking in the cut, the tattoos, the whole picture. I saw the switch flip in his head. The story wrote itself for him. Biker thug threatening public servants. Case closed. "That's him," the suit said, pointing a dramatic finger at me. "He's been threatening us, refusing to let us carry out a lawful court order. He's holding that family hostage." My blood ran cold at the word hostage. He was escalating this, twisting it into something it wasn't. I could feel Leo's grip tighten on my cut. I kept my hands folded across my chest, my posture non-threatening. Any sudden move now, and these jumpy cops would light me up. "Sir," the cop with the mustache barked at me, his hand now firmly on his gun. "Step away from the family. Put your hands on your head. Now." I didn't move. "I'm not holding anyone hostage," I said, my voice low and steady. "I just asked to see their paperwork. They refused." "You have no right to see any paperwork," the CPS woman snapped, her confidence surging now that she was surrounded by uniforms. "He's lying. He stood up. He threatened us." "I asked a question," I repeated, my eyes fixed on the lead cop. This whole thing feels wrong. The kid came to me for help. He was scared. His mother is terrified. I just wanted to make sure everything was on the level before they dragged a screaming little girl out of here." The state trooper, who had been silent until now, spoke up. His voice was deep and calm, a stark contrast to everyone else's panic. "He's right, Phil," he said to the local cop. "If they have a court order, let's see it. Diffuse the situation." The male suit sputtered, his face turning an even deeper shade of red. "This is outrageous. We are agents of the state. Our authority shouldn't be questioned by him." He gestured at me with contempt. The trooper ignored him, his gaze still on me. "You got a name?" "They call me Grizz," I said. He nodded slowly. "All right, Grizz, I understand your concern, but right now you're making a tense situation worse. You're outnumbered and outgunned. So how about this? You take a step back, let my men secure the scene, and we'll look at the paperwork. We'll sort this out like reasonable people." It was a fair offer, a lifeline. The smart play was to take it. But as I looked back at the booth, I saw the raw terror on the mother's face. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking at the CPS agents, and beyond them, at something unseen, something she was deathly afraid of. And Leo hadn't let go of my cut. His knuckles were white. He trusted me. Taking a step back felt like a betrayal. "Let them show you the papers first," I said to the trooper. "Right here, in front of me and the mother. Then I'll back off." The mustached cop, Phil, had heard enough. "That's it. I'm not negotiating with this scumbag. You want to do this the hard way, we'll do it the hard way." He and another officer started to advance on me. "No!" the mother cried out, scrambling out of the booth and putting herself between me and the cops. "Please don't hurt him. He was only trying to help." It was chaos. The cops were yelling at the mother to get out of the way. The CPS people were shouting that she was complicit. Little Maya was wailing in the booth. And Leo was a silent, terrified statue attached to my back. I knew this was it. This was going to end badly. I was going to get tased, or beaten, or worse, and this family would be ripped apart anyway. I had failed. And then something happened that nobody expected. The diner door opened again. The bell chimed, a ridiculous little sound in the middle of the pandemonium. Standing in the doorway, shaking rain from a long coat, was an old man. He looked like he was 100 years old, with thin white hair, a face like a wrinkled road map, and eyes that were a startlingly pale blue. He was leaning heavily on a wooden cane. He looked like a harmless grandfather who had wandered in looking for a cup of tea. He took in the scene, the cops, the crying children, me standing there like a cornered bear. And he didn't look surprised or scared. He just looked disappointed. He let his pale eyes drift over everyone before they finally settled on the state trooper. "Sergeant Miller," the old man said, his voice surprisingly strong and clear. "What in God's name is going on in my diner? You're scaring away my customers." The state trooper's entire demeanor changed. He straightened up, his professional calm cracking to reveal genuine shock. "Judge Peterson?" he stammered. What are you doing here?" The old man, Judge Peterson, tapped his cane on the floor. "I was getting a pie, Sergeant. It's Tuesday. Apple crumb is the special. Now, would someone care to explain to me why it looks like a SWAT raid is happening in front of the pastry case?" The male CPS agent, seeing a new, more powerful authority figure, immediately rushed forward. "Your Honor, thank goodness. We have a court order to take custody of this child," he said, pointing at Maya. "We've been obstructed by this violent criminal." The judge turned his piercing blue eyes on the agent. "Is that so?" he said softly. "A court order, you say? Signed by whom?" "Judge Harrison, Family Court Division," the agent said proudly, puffing out his chest. A slow, cold smile spread across Judge Peterson's wrinkled face. "Harrison," he mused, as if tasting the name. "Funny. I had him disbarred this morning. Turns out he's been rubber-stamping custody orders for a private adoption ring in exchange for a cut of the profits. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" The air in the diner didn't just get quiet. It was sucked out of the room, leaving a vacuum of pure, unadulterated shock. The CPS agent's face went from smug crimson to a pasty, fish-belly white. He opened and closed his mouth a few times, but no sound came out. His female partner looked like she was about to faint, her hand flying to her throat as she stared at the old judge in horror. Even the cops were frozen, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning comprehension. Judge Peterson took a slow, deliberate step into the room, his cane thudding rhythmically on the linoleum. "You see," he continued, his voice deceptively gentle, "I've been a judge in this county for 42 years. I know the law. And I also know the people. When a frantic mother calls my chambers directly, bypassing her own useless lawyer because she's convinced the system is rigged to steal her child for a father with deep pockets and a history of violence, well, a man my age learns to pay attention to his gut." He fixed his gaze on the male CPS agent. "My gut told me to look into Judge Harrison, and my clerk, a very resourceful young man, found a pattern. Dozens of cases just like this one. A wealthy parent, usually with a questionable record, suddenly gets full custody. The paperwork is rushed, the other parent is railroaded, and the caseworkers from your specific office, Mr. Davies," the judge's voice turned to ice, "are always the ones assigned to facilitate the transfer." Mr. Davies finally found his voice, a pathetic squeak. I don't. That's a lie." The judge ignored him, turning his attention to the state trooper. "Sergeant Miller, I do believe you're now in the presence of two individuals actively committing felony kidnapping under the color of law. I suggest you detain them before they decide to run." It was like a spell had been broken. Sergeant Miller blinked once, then his face hardened into a mask of professional duty. "Phil, cuff them," he ordered. "Both of them." The mustached cop, Phil, looked from the judge to the now trembling CPS agents. The pieces clicked into place. He holstered his sidearm and pulled out his handcuffs, a grim satisfaction on his face as he advanced on the pair who had called him in. "You have the right to remain silent," he began, the words sounding all the more powerful in the stunned silence of the diner. As the two disgraced agents were being cuffed, their bluster and authority vanishing into thin air, the judge's pale blue eyes finally landed on me. He took in my leather cut, the club patch, and the small boy still clinging to the back of it. He didn't look at me with fear or contempt. He just looked curious. "And you, sir?" he asked. "What's your part in all this?" I felt Leo's hand finally release its grip on my cut. I slowly unfolded my arms. "My name is Grizz, Your Honor, and I was just having a cup of coffee." The judge's lips twitched into a small smile. "I see." He looked at Leo, who was now peeking around my leg. "And what about you, young man? What's your story?" Leo stepped out from behind me, his courage returning now that the monsters were in chains. He stood up straight and looked the judge in the eye. "My name is Leo," he said, his voice clear. "And Grizz was helping me. He wouldn't let them take my sister." The judge's smile widened. He looked from Leo to his mother, who was now weeping with relief, hugging little Maya so tightly it was a wonder the girl could breathe. He looked at the chaos of the diner, then back to me. "Well, Grizz," he said, his voice warm with an approval that hit me harder than any punch ever could. "It seems to me you did more than just have a cup of coffee. You upheld the spirit of the law when its letter was being abused. You stood your ground for people who couldn't. This county could use more men like you." My throat felt tight. I just gave a curt nod, not trusting myself to speak. In the aftermath, things happened quickly. The fake CPS agents were led away in disgrace. The local cops, looking deeply embarrassed, apologized to the mother and to me before clearing out. Sergeant Miller took a detailed statement from the mother, assuring her that she and her children were now under his personal protection and that the fraudulent custody order was void. Brenda, the waitress, who had watched the whole thing with wide eyes, silently came over and refilled my coffee mug, placing a huge slice of apple crumb pie next to it. "On the house," she whispered, and gave me a genuine, heartfelt smile. The diner slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. The rain had stopped, and a weak afternoon sun was breaking through the clouds. The mother, whose name I learned was Sarah, came over to my table, holding Maya's hand. Leo walked beside her, his head held high. I don't know what to say," Sarah stammered, tears of gratitude shining in her eyes. "You saved us. You're a hero." I shook my head, uncomfortable with the word. "The kid's the hero," I rumbled, looking at Leo. He's the one who had the guts to ask for help. You've got a good boy there." Leo beamed, a proper kid smile finally breaking through his serious expression. He walked right up to me and, without a moment's hesitation, wrapped his small arms around my waist in a hug. It was so unexpected, it took me a second to react. Then, I tentatively rested one of my big, calloused hands on his small back. It felt right. Someone in the diner, a teenager in another booth, had been filming the whole thing on their phone from the moment the cops burst in. As Sarah and her kids finally left, safe and together, the video was already being uploaded. By the time I finished my pie and threw a leg over my bike, my phone was buzzing incessantly. The story was going viral. The moment a black child asked a Hell's Angel to stop them from taking his sister. The world would see a monster and a hero. They'd probably get it wrong. They wouldn't see the tired man who just wanted to be left alone, or the terrified kid who wouldn't give up. They'd just see the headline. But as I fired up my engine and the familiar roar filled the air, I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, the noise in my head was quiet. I had broken the rule. I hadn't minded my own business, and it was the best damn thing I'd ever done.